In the animal kingdom, justice isn't just a human concept. When we look beyond our cities and screens, nature reveals surprising champions of fairness, cooperation and resistance against oppression. From ravens that hold funeral rituals for their fallen to elephants that risk their lives protecting the vulnerable, animals have been modeling social justice principles long before humans coined the term. What if I told you that the next revolution in activism might come from studying how animals instinctively fight against inequality? The chimpanzee that shares food with hungry group members isn't just being kind, it's redistributing resources. The dolphins that form protective circles around injured pod members aren't just showing compassion, they're creating systems of care that leave no one behind. Today, we're diving into the remarkable world where animal behavior intersects with social justice. You'll discover how wolves establish democratic decision-making, how bees enforce accountability within their colonies, and how these natural behaviors can transform the way we approach human activism. By the end of this journey, you won't just see animals as creatures to protect. You'll recognize them as teachers who've been showing us the path to a more just world all along. Their instinctive wisdom might hold the key to solving social problems we've struggled with for centuries. Have you ever wondered how animals survive without money, banks, or economic systems? In the wild, there's an entirely different currency at work, and it might just revolutionize how we think about social justice in our own communities. When we talk about nature, most of us immediately think survival of the fittest, a constant battle where only the strongest survive. But what if I told you that beneath this competitive surface lies something truly remarkable? Something that challenges everything we thought we knew about natural selection and the so-called law of the jungle. Consider the vampire bat, a creature often feared and misunderstood. These small mammals have developed something extraordinary, a sharing economy that puts many human welfare systems to shame. When a vampire bat fails to find food on a given night, it doesn't just starve. Instead, another bat will regurgitate some of its blood meal to feed its hungry companion. This isn't just random kindness, they're actually keeping track. Bats remember who has shared with them and who hasn't, creating a sophisticated network of reciprocity. But this isn't just about vampire bats. Across the animal kingdom we see similar patterns. Wolves bring meat back to pack members who couldn't join the hunt. Primates share fruits with those who have none. Elephants support injured herd members, sometimes for years. This brings us to our first principle out of 8, the empathy economy. In the animal world, survival often depends not on competition, but on cooperation and resource sharing. These natural welfare systems ensure that basic needs are met for all members of the community, not just the strongest or most fortunate. What makes this so revolutionary is that these animals have naturally developed systems that many human societies still struggle to implement. They've created safety nets that ensure no member goes without basic necessities, not through complex legislation or bureaucracy, but through direct, compassionate action. Imagine if we approached human social justice with this same instinctive understanding that our collective survival depends on ensuring everyone's basic needs are met. What if we recognized, as these animals do, that true security comes not from hoarding resources, but from creating networks where everyone gives and receives? The next time someone tells you that inequality is just natural or that competition is the only way, remember the vampire bat sharing its meal or the wolf pack feeding its members. Nature's most successful social species don't leave their vulnerable behind. They've discovered that true resilience comes through sharing, not hoarding. When we think of leadership, we often imagine a single, powerful figure making all the decisions. But throughout the natural world, something far more revolutionary is happening, and it holds powerful lessons for how we approach social change in our own communities. Have you ever watched a flock of birds suddenly change direction in perfect unison? Or wondered how thousands of fish can move as one body without crashing into each other? There's something happening here that scientists have been studying for decades, and it might completely transform how you think about leadership and decision-making. In schools of fish, there is no permanent leader. Instead, leadership rotates based on who has the most relevant knowledge or experience for the current situation. A fish that knows where food is located might temporarily lead the group there. When danger appears, another fish with the best view of a predator takes over to guide the school to safety. This fluid leadership structure allows the collective to benefit from each individual's unique perspective and expertise. The same pattern appears across the animal kingdom. In honeybee colonies, scouts with knowledge about potential new hive locations lead temporary committees that evaluate options. Baboon troops rely on different members to lead, depending on whether they're searching for water, foraging for food, or navigating through dangerous territory. This brings us to our second principle out of 8 nature's grassroots movements: super nature's grassroots movements. Animal collectives respond to threats and opportunities through decentralized decision-making, creating natural models for distributed authority and situational expertise. What's revolutionary about this approach is that it completely redefines our understanding of leadership. These animals have discovered that the wisdom of the group is more powerful than the authority of any single individual. They've developed systems where leadership is a temporary role based on knowledge and skill rather than a permanent position of power. Imagine if our own social justice movements operated this way, where leaders emerged organically based on their specific expertise, where diverse perspectives were valued as essential to group survival, and where power circulated rather than concentrated. What if we recognized, like these animals do, that the most resilient communities are those where leadership is fluid and responsive rather than rigid and hierarchical? The next time you're working for change in your community, remember the school of fish or the honeybee colony. Nature's most effective collective movements don't rely on permanent leaders. They've discovered that true resilience comes through distributed wisdom and shared power. What happens when someone breaks the rules in your community? In human society, we've built complex legal systems with courts, police and prisons, but throughout the natural world, animals maintain social order in ways that might completely transform how we think about justice and accountability. Have you ever wondered how animals maintain social harmony without formal laws or enforcement systems? The answer lies in something so sophisticated, yet so simple that it might revolutionize our approach to community justice. Consider the raven, one of nature's most intelligent birds. These remarkable creatures live in complex social groups where trust and cooperation are essential for survival. When a raven repeatedly steals food from others rather than contributing to finding resources, something fascinating happens. The group doesn't imprison the offender or engage in violent punishment. Instead, they begin to ostracize the thief, excluding them from shared activities, refusing to cooperate with them, and withholding the social connections that are vital for survival. This pattern appears across the animal kingdom. Wolves may temporarily exclude pack members who violate social norms. Primates like chimpanzees use graduated responses to antisocial behavior, starting with warnings before escalating to temporary social exclusion. Even tiny, naked mole rats maintain colony harmony through social feedback rather than force. This brings us to our third principle out of 8, the accountability web. Social species enforce ethical codes without formal laws, creating community-based accountability systems that work without relying on punishment or violence. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it focuses on restoration rather than retribution. These animals have discovered that the purpose of accountability isn't to punish, but to protect community well-being and encourage reintegration. They've developed systems where feedback is immediate, proportional, and directly related to the harm caused. Imagine if our own justice systems operated this way, where the response to harm prioritized healing relationships rather than inflicting suffering, where accountability was maintained through community connection rather than isolation, and where the ultimate goal was reintegration rather than exclusion. What if we recognized, like these animals do, that sustainable communities require accountability systems based on relationships rather than force? The next time you're thinking about justice in your community, remember the ravens and their accountability web. Nature's most harmonious societies don't rely on punitive measures. They've discovered that true peace comes through community-centered approaches that balance accountability with compassion. In a world increasingly divided by difference, some of nature's most remarkable alliances offer powerful lessons that could transform how we approach social justice. What if I told you that throughout the animal kingdom, species that seem to have nothing in common are forming partnerships that help all members thrive? Have you ever noticed birds of completely different species flying together in mixed flocks? Or wondered why zebras, gazelles, and wildebeests often graze together despite competing for similar food sources? There's something remarkable happening here that challenges everything we thought we knew about natural relationships. Consider the mixed species bird flocks found in forests worldwide. These diverse groups, sometimes containing 20 or more different species, travel and forage together despite their differences. When one species spots a predator, they sound an alarm that benefits everyone. Each brings unique skills to the collective. Some birds excel at spotting ground predators, others at detecting aerial threats, while others are better at finding certain types of food. Their differences become their strength. This pattern appears across the natural world. On the African savanna, different herbivores form alliances where zebras with excellent vision, wildebeests with keen smell, and giraffes with height advantages create collective security through their diverse abilities. In coral reefs, cleaner fish form mutually beneficial relationships with large predatory fish, creating safe zones that benefit the entire ecosystem. This brings us to our fourth principle out of 8, cross-species solidarity. Throughout nature, we find unexpected alliances between different species facing common threats, demonstrating how diversity creates stronger protective networks and how differences become strengths when facing systemic challenges. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it completely redefines how we think about alliances and diversity. These animals have discovered that the most resilient communities are those that bring together different strengths and perspectives. They've developed partnerships where differences aren't just tolerated, but are essential to collective survival. Imagine if our own social justice movements embraced this understanding, where different groups recognized their common threats and opportunities, where diverse perspectives were valued as essential to collective security, and where differences in approach were seen as complementary rather than competitive. What if we recognized, as these animals do, that our differences make us stronger when we face common challenges? The next time you encounter someone with different experiences or perspectives, remember the mixed species bird flocks or the savanna alliances. Nature's most resilient communities don't fear difference. They've discovered that true power comes through solidarity across difference. In our rapidly changing world, the wisdom of older generations is often dismissed as outdated or irrelevant. But throughout the natural world, the survival of entire species depends on something we're increasingly losing in human society: the deep knowledge passed down from elders to the young. Have you ever wondered how elephant herds find water during severe droughts, even in places they haven't visited for decades? Or how certain whale populations navigate migration routes spanning thousands of miles with remarkable precision? There's something profound happening here that might transform how we think about wisdom and knowledge across generations. Consider the African elephant, a species facing mounting threats from climate change and habitat loss. Elephant herds are led by matriarchs, females who may be 50, 60 or even 70 years old. During extreme droughts, these elder leaders draw on memories from decades earlier to guide their families to hidden water sources they visited in previous climate crises. This knowledge, impossible to acquire in a single lifetime, becomes literal life-saving wisdom for the entire herd. This pattern appears throughout the animal kingdom. Orca pods rely on postmenopausal females who no longer reproduce but serve as repositories of ecological knowledge. Indigenous bird populations depend on older members who remember reliable food sources across vast territories. Even in fish species, elder members guide migration patterns essential for spawning success. This brings us to our fifth principle out of 8 intergenerational knowledge transfer. Throughout nature, elder animals serve as knowledge keepers and social teachers, preserving wisdom across generations that ensures community survival during unprecedented challenges. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it completely redefines how we value different life stages. These animal societies have discovered that the post-reproductive phase isn't a time of diminished value, but a crucial period where hard-won knowledge becomes a community resource. They've developed systems where elder wisdom becomes a form of survival insurance for the entire group. Imagine if our own social justice movements operated with this same reverence for generational wisdom, where elders who witnessed previous social movements shared tactical knowledge with younger activists, where indigenous knowledge about sustainable practices was centered rather than marginalized, and where the experience of those who've witnessed historical cycles informed current strategy. What if we recognized, as these animals do, that sustainable change requires both the energy of youth and the wisdom of experience? The next time someone dismisses the contributions of elders as irrelevant, remember the elephant matriarch leading her herd to water during drought. Nature's most resilient species don't discard their elders. They've discovered that true sustainability comes through honoring the knowledge that only time can provide. In our constantly connected, always-on world, rest is often viewed as laziness or lack of commitment. But throughout the natural world, animals have discovered something that many human activists are only beginning to understand: that sustainable change requires rhythms of rest and action. Have you ever watched meerkats standing guard over their colony rotating shifts so each member gets adequate rest? Or noticed how predators like lions spend much of their day resting between intense hunting periods? There's a profound wisdom here that challenges everything our productivity-obsessed culture teaches us about commitment and effectiveness. Consider the meerkat colonies of southern Africa, where survival depends on constant vigilance against predators. Rather than demanding that each member remain perpetually alert, an impossible task, meerkats take turns standing guard. While one keeps watch, others rest, play or forage. The sentinel role rotates through the community, ensuring that the vital function of security is maintained while no individual burns out from constant vigilance. This pattern appears throughout the animal kingdom. Wolf packs alternate hunting duties. Dolphin pods sleep one brain hemisphere at a time, allowing some members to rest while others maintain group awareness. Bee colonies regulate individual workloads to prevent exhaustion that would threaten the hive. This brings us to our sixth principle out of 8, revolutionary rest. Throughout nature, animals prioritize recovery and rest as essential to community health, illustrating that sustainable activism requires cycles of engagement and recovery rather than constant vigilance. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it completely redefines how we think about commitment and effectiveness. These animal communities have discovered that sustainable effort isn't about constant action, but about strategic rhythms of engagement and recovery. They've developed systems where rest isn't a luxury, but an essential component of collective resilience. Imagine if our social justice movements operated with this same understanding, where activists created structures that prevented burnout rather than celebrating it, where self-care was understood as a strategic necessity rather than selfish indulgence, and where sustainability was measured across years rather than news cycles. What if we recognized, as these animals do, that the longest-lasting movements are those that build rest into their fundamental structure? The next time someone equates rest with lack of commitment, remember the meerkats taking turns standing guard. Nature's most effective communities don't demand constant vigilance. They've discovered that true sustainability comes through honoring the biological necessity of rest and recovery. In a world of rapidly changing threats, rigid responses often fail. But throughout the natural world, animals have developed something remarkable: the ability to continuously evolve their strategies in response to new challenges. This adaptive approach holds powerful lessons for how we pursue lasting social change. Have you ever wondered how crows solve increasingly complex puzzles, or how octopuses find new ways to escape seemingly secure tanks? There's something extraordinary happening here that might transform how we think about effective resistance and problem-solving in our own justice work. Consider the remarkable corvids ravens, crows and their relatives, among the most intelligent birds on the planet. When faced with a new challenge, like a particularly difficult food source to access, they don't just try the same approach over and over. Instead, they experiment with different tools and techniques, learning from each attempt. When humans develop deterrents to keep them from certain areas, these birds quickly develop counter-strategies, sometimes even teaching these new approaches to others in their community. This pattern appears throughout the animal kingdom. When beavers encounter flowing water, they adapt their dam-building techniques to the specific conditions of each stream. Primates develop new tool uses when environmental conditions change. Even bacteria evolve resistance to antibiotics through continuous adaptation. This brings us to our 7th principle out of 8 adaptive resistance tactics. Throughout nature, animals change their resistance strategies based on evolving threats, offering lessons for how social movements can remain agile and innovative when conventional approaches fail. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it redefines how we think about strategy and effectiveness. These animals have discovered that rigid approaches eventually fail in changing environments, no matter how successful they once were. They've developed a capacity for continuous learning and adaptation that allows them to respond to novel challenges. Imagine if our social justice movements operated with this same adaptive intelligence, where tactics evolved in response to changing conditions, where failure was treated as valuable information rather than defeat, and where innovation was constant rather than exceptional. What if we recognized, as these animals do, that effectiveness isn't about finding the perfect strategy once and for all, but about developing the capacity to continuously evolve our approaches? The next time your movement faces a setback or a new challenge, remember the crow solving increasingly complex puzzles. Nature's most resilient species don't cling to failed strategies. They've discovered that true effectiveness comes through continuous adaptation and learning. In movements for social change, we often focus exclusively on resistance and struggle. But throughout the natural world, animals have discovered something essential that many human movements overlook: the revolutionary power of shared joy and celebration. Have you ever watched dolphins playing together in synchronized swimming patterns that seem to serve no survival purpose? Or noticed how elephants gather to splash and play in water sources? There's something profound happening in these moments that might completely transform how we think about building effective movements for change. Consider the remarkable play behaviors of dolphins, who create elaborate games involving synchronized swimming, tossing objects, and creating underwater bubble rings. These activities strengthen bonds between pod members, build trust and coordination skills, and create the social cohesion necessary for collective action during times of danger. What looks like just play is actually building the foundation for their survival as a community. This pattern appears throughout the animal kingdom. Young wolves engage in play fighting that develops the coordination needed for future hunting. Primates strengthen social bonds through grooming and play. Ravens have been observed sliding down snowy slopes repeatedly, engaging in what appears to be pure enjoyment. This brings us to our eighth and final principle: the power of collective joy. Throughout nature, play behaviors strengthen the social bonds crucial for collective action, demonstrating how shared celebratory experiences build the trust and coordination necessary for effective community organizing. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it completely redefines how we think about joy and celebration in relation to serious work. These animal communities have discovered that play isn't frivolous, but foundational to collective resilience. They've developed practices where shared joy becomes a strategic resource rather than a distraction from important work. Imagine if our social justice movements operated with this same understanding, where celebration was integrated into our organizing rather than separated from it, where joy was understood as a form of resistance rather than an escape from it, and where building pleasurable bonds was valued as essential movement work. What if we recognized, as these animals do, that sustainable movements require not just shared struggle but shared joy? The next time someone dismisses celebration as a distraction from serious movement work, remember the dolphins engaged in synchronized play. Nature's most cohesive communities don't separate joy from survival. They've discovered that true resilience comes through honoring the power of collective celebration. As we've journeyed through these 8 principles from the animal kingdom, we've discovered something profound: that the wisdom for creating more just communities has been modeled in nature all along, from the vampire bat's sharing economy to the dolphin's collective joy. Animals have been practicing social justice principles that we humans are only beginning to understand. These aren't just interesting animal behaviors, they're revolutionary templates for reimagining how we pursue change in our own world. The empathy economy shows us that sharing resources ensures community survival. Grassroots movements demonstrate the power of distributed leadership. The accountability web reveals how communities can maintain harmony without punishment. Cross-species solidarity illustrates how differences become strengths. Intergenerational knowledge transfer proves the essential value of elder wisdom. Revolutionary rest demonstrates the necessity of sustainable rhythms. Adaptive resistance tactics show the importance of continuous evolution. And collective joy reminds us that celebration builds the bonds that make collective action possible. The next time someone tells you that competition, hierarchy and individualism are simply natural, remember what we've discovered together. Nature's most resilient species have been modeling cooperation, distributed power and collective care all along. By looking to these animal social justice warriors as our teachers, we can find inspiration for building human communities that are more just, sustainable, and alive with possibility. The revolution we seek isn't just coming, it's been happening all around us if only we have the wisdom to notice and learn.